Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. The quote of the day is the future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams. So the topic of discussion is dependent sample t-test under the kind supervision of Professor Dr. Saira Afzal and I am Dr. Muhammad Awais. By the end of this presentation, participants will be able to describe what is dependent sample t-test, its uses, how it is calculated and interpreted. In testing, we have two types of tests that are parametric and non-parametric. Parametric tests are used when the data is normally distributed, and non-parametric tests are used where the data is not normally distributed. These are the list of parametric and non-parametric tests. Regarding today's topic, our uh, our sample is two dependent sample test, and in parametric test there will be the paired sample t-test, and in non-parametric test its counterpart will be the Wilcoxon sign test. Now, what is the dependent sample t-test? It requires that the data is normally distributed, that it requires the condition of normality. In this, the distribution curve will be the normal bell shape, and the sample will be the dependent sample. That is, mm, the test is underwent on the same individual before and after the test, and its non-parametric counterpart is the Wilcoxon sign rank test. Now, what are the dependent samples? The dependent samples are considered to be dependent samples when the subjects are paired or matched in some way. Know the general application of the dependent sample t-test. In medicine, it has the particular medicine or treatment been affected, and in marketing, has the sales increased past a particular campaign, and in manufacturing, has the cycle time reduced or defects reduced pre and post a particular process chain, and in logistics, has the transit time reduced from supplier to the consumer pre and post a route chain. The strength of dependent sample t-test is that it requires a sample size. Requires a smaller sample size, and each sample contains individual with the same characteristics. And the weakness is that the potential for sample size reduction. If the sample drops, the both of our data sets will be decreased, and there is the potential for the order effects. As the test is undergone on the same subject before and after the test, in the second test, when the test is conducted second time on the subject, he will learn how to pass that test. So it will uh, uh, render the results. And the third one is that in the descriptive testing of the material object, you can only test them once. Notice the procedure table of the calculation of the dependent sample t-test. In the step 1, we have to state the hypothesis and identify the claim. For the two tail test, our null hypothesis will be mu d is equal to 0, where the mu d is the difference of the means. And the alternative hypothesis is that the mu d is not equal to 0, while in left hand and left tail test, our alternative hypothesis will be that mu d is smaller than 0. And in right tail test, our alternative hypothesis is that the difference of the mean is greater than 0. In the next step, we will find the critical value, and in third step, we will compute the test value. For computing the test value, we need further procedures. For example, we will arrange all the data sets in first column and we'll name it as first reading or x1. And in the second column, we will arrange all the data sets that are conducted second time and we will denote it by x2. And in the next step, we will find the differences between the x1 and x2. And in next step, we will take the square of the differences. And in next step, we will find the standard deviation of the differences. The formula for in the that is used for standard deviation in dependent sample t-test is n, that is the sample size, into summation d square, that is the that is the sum of all the differences in the data set, and then we will subtract it from sigma d whole square divided by n into n minus 1. Then we will find the test value. The formula is d bar, that is the mean of the observations minus mu d over standard deviation over square root over n, where d dot f, it is the degree of freedom, is equal to n minus 1. N is the sample size. Then in the fourth step, we will make the decision, and in the fifth step, we will summarize the results. Here I missed this thing. The formula for finding the mean of the difference is sigma d, sum of all the differences divided by the sample size. The formula in the final step follows the basic format of the basic format. The test value is observed value minus expected value over the standard error, where observed value is the mean of the differences and the expected value mu d is 0 if the hypothesis is mu d is equal to 0. The standard error of the difference is the standard deviation of the difference divided by the square root of the sample size. Both populations must be normally distributed, approximately normally distributed. So there is here is the first example of problem solving using the dependent sample t-test. It is the example of the vitamin for increased strength. A physical education director claims by taking a special vitamin, a weightlifter can increase his strength. 8 athletes are selected and given a test of strength using standard bench press. After 2 weeks of regular training, supplemented with the vitamin, they are tested again. Test the effectiveness of the vitamin regimen at level of significance 0.05. Each value in these data represents the maximum number of pounds that athlete can bench press. Assume that the variable is approximately normally distributed. Here is the sample sizes of 8 athletes and their bench press in pounds before the vitamin is given in the table given in this row x1, and their strength after the vitamin is given in this row x2. Now we will solve this problem. So in first step, we have to state the hypothesis and identify the claim. For the vitamin to be effective, the before weights must be significantly less than the after weight, and the mean of the differences must be less than the zero. So our null hypothesis difference of the mean is equal to zero, and our alternative hypothesis is mu d is less than zero. That is our claim. And in the second step, we will find the critical value. For a critical value, we need to have the degree of freedom. We find the degree of freedom by subtracting 1 from the sample size. In this case, as there are 8, the sample size of 8, so we will subtract it from 1 and our degree of freedom will be 7. The critical value for the left tail test with alpha 0.05 is calculated minus 1.895. This value is calculated from the table of the critical values for the t-test. It is calculated by having three things. First, the two-tail test. Second, we need the degree of freedom, and in third is we need the alpha value or the level of significance. Then we will compute the test value. For this, we will make the table as described earlier. We will find the differences between the before and after test, and we will then take the square. We will take the sum of all the differences that comes out to be sigma t is equal to minus 19, and we will take the sum of all the squares of the differences, that is sigma d square, that comes out to be 209. Then in the next step we will find the mean of the differences. For mean of the differences, we will take this value, that is sigma d, that is the sum of all the differences, that is minus 19 over sample size, that is 8. So the uh, uh, difference for the mean comes out to be minus 2.375. Then we will find the standard deviation of the differences. This is the formula of the standard deviation. We will put all these values in this formula. So our standard deviation in this case comes out to be 4.84. Then in the next one, we will find the test value. For finding the test value, this is the formula, and we will put all these values in the formula, and our t value of the test value comes out to be minus 1.388. In the next step, we will make the decision. The decision is not to reject the null hypothesis at alpha 0.05, since minus 1.388 is greater than minus 1.895, as minus 1.388 is greater than minus 1.895. So the t-value is not in the rejection region. We will not reject our null hypothesis. In the final step, we will summarize the result. So there is not any evidence to support the claim that the vitamin increases the strength of the weightlifter. Here is a second example of problem solving of the dependent sample t-test. This is an example of cholesterol level. A dietitian wishes to see if a person's cholesterol level will change if a diet is supplemented by a certain mineral. 6 subjects were presented pre-tested, and then they took the mineral supplement for 6 week period. The results are shown in table. Cholesterol level is measured in milligrams per deciliter. Can it be concluded that the cholesterol level has been changed at alpha 0.10? Assume the variable is approximately normally distributed. Here is the data of the pre-test and the post-test. So in this step, first step we will state the hypothesis and identify the claim. So, for stating the null hypothesis and the alternative hypothesis, if the diet is effective, the before cholesterol level should be different from the after level. So, our alternative hypothesis will be mu d is not equal to 0. This is the two-tailed test. In the previous example, that was the right-tailed test. In the next step, we will find the critical value. So this is a two-tailed test, and the degree of freedom is 5 as the sample size is 6, and alpha value is 0.10. So the critical value calculated is plus minus 2.015, and in the next step we will compute the test value. We will make the table, and then we will find the differences, and we will add all the differences to get the value of sigma d, and then we will find the squares of all the differences, and then we will sum up all these differences to get the sigma d square, which comes out to be 4890. Then we will find the mean of the differences by taking the sigma d, that is 100 over 6, that is the sample value, that comes out to be 16.7. Then in the next step, we will find the standard deviation of the differences. We will put all the values in the formula, and we will get the standard deviation of 25.4. Then we will find the test value. We will put all these values in the formula, and the test value comes out to be 1.60. So in the next step, we will make the decision. The decision is not to reject the null hypothesis, since the test value is 1.610, is in the non-critical region as shown in the figure. As our computed t-test value is 1.610, and it is less than the critical value, and it is not in the rejection region. It is not beyond the this critical line. So our t value is not in the rejection region. We will not reject our null hypothesis. In the next step, we will summarize the results. So the result is that there is not enough evidence to support the claim that the mineral changes a person's cholesterol level. Now time for the recent update. First article is effectiveness of 20% Artican as an anesthetic agent in children, a randomized controlled trial. This study is published in 2019. The aim of this study was to compare the effectiveness of 2% Artican and 2% lignocaine in achieving adequate anesthesia in children between age group 6 to 13 years using inferior alveolar nerve block. A triple-blinded randomized controlled trial was conducted in 180% in home. 90 patients took 2% Artican, and 90 patients took 2% lignocaine. Effectiveness of the anesthetic agent was determined at 3 points determined by the subjective evaluation of pain using pain scale. Paired sample t-test and chi-square test were performed for statistical significance. The result in this study is that anesthetic success of 2% Artican was 64%, 42%, and 81% respectively at 3 points, while the anesthetic success of 2% lignocaine was 66, 48, and 85% at the 3 points. The conclusion is that this study concludes that 2% Articaine in 1 ratio 2 lakh did not demonstrate superior clinical effectiveness in comparison to 2% lignocaine. Lignocaine has always been considered the gold standard. With its unique chemical structure and increased potency, Articaine has been gaining popularity. Its efficacy in 2% concentration had not been compared to 2% lignocaine. 2% Articaine did not show clinical superiority, but its comparable effectiveness with lignocaine can encourage further research in using Articaine in reduced concentrations to improve effectiveness. Second article is the impact of COVID-19 epidemic declaration on psychological consequences, a study on active Weibo users. COVID-19 has significantly resulted in a large number of psychological consequences. The aim of this study is to explore the impacts of COVID-19 on people's mental health. We sample and analyze Weibo posts from 1786 active Weibo users using the approach of the online ecological recognition. The Weibo user, it is some sort of app in China. Based on several machine learning predictive models, we calculated word frequency scores of emotional indicators, for example, anxiety, depression, indignation, and export happiness, and cognitive indicators that are social risk judgment and life satisfaction from the collected data. The sentiment analysis and the paired sample t-test were compared to examine the difference in the same group before and after the declaration of the COVID-19 on 20 January 2020. The results show that negative emotions that is anxiety, depression, and indignation, and sensitivity to social risk increase, while the scores of positive emotions, that is upward happiness and life satisfaction, decrease. People were concerned more about their health and family, while less about their leisure and friends. The result contribute to the knowledge gaps of short-term and visual changes in psychological conditions after the outbreak. It may provide reference for policymakers to plan and fight against COVID-19 effectively by improving stability of popular feelings and urgently prepare clinical practitioners to deliver corresponding therapy foundations for the risk groups and affected people. Know the MCQ. First MCQ is, in case of testing the difference between the means of two dependent samples, the degree of freedom are equal to whether n1 minus n2, n minus 1, t minus 1, smaller of the n1 minus 1 or n2 minus 1, or the larger of the n1 minus 1 or n2 minus 1. Which is the correct option? Uh, Independent sample t-test, the degree of freedom is calculated by subtracting 1 from the sample size. Whatever our sample size is, if we subtract it from 1, we will get the degree of freedom. So in this case, beta is the correct option, n minus 1. Second MCQ is, a group of 10 students were randomly drawn from class 12 and was given yoga training for 3 weeks. Their wellness lifestyle was compared with another similarly selected group which do not undergo such training. Which type of statistical test will be appropriate if data were normally distributed for testing the tenability of null hypothesis, where dependent sample t-test, independent sample t-test, Wilcoxon sign rank, Wilcoxon rank sum, or chi-square test? Which test we will use? The data is normally distributed, uh, and there are two kinds of samples. We will use the independent sample test as the data is normally distributed, and there are two class of the samples. One got the training, the other don't. So beta is the correct option, independent sample t-test. Third MCQ is, as a researcher, you have been asked to determine if the air quality in Pakistan has changed over the past 2 years. You select a random sample of 10 metropolitan areas and find the number of days each year that the areas fail to meet the acceptable air quality standard. The data are shown. Find the degree of freedom for applying it in the dependent sample t-test. The random sample is of 10, so we have to find the degree of freedom. What it would be, 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10. As I stated in my first MCQ, that for to calculate the degree of freedom, we will have to subtract 1 from the sample size. So in this scenario, the sample size is of 10, we will subtract it from 1, so our degree of freedom will be 9. Fourth MCQ is, a study was done by Brody et al. In 2014 to know the difference between the brain volumes of smokers and non-smokers. The null hypothesis will be rejected if computed t-value is greater than critical t-value, or the computed t-value is less than critical t-value, or the computed t-value is equal to critical t-value, or the computed t-value lies in the rejection region, or there is no difference between the means.
Beta.
Delta is the correct option. We will reject the null hypothesis if our computed t-value lies in the critical region. Fifth MCQ is, a researcher measured the same group of people's mood while watching horror films and compared them to when watching comedy films. The resulting data were normally distributed. What test should be used to analyze the data? Whether dependent sample t-test, independent sample t-test, Wilcoxon sign rank test, Wilcoxon rank sum, or chi-square test?
Alpha. A. Alpha.
Yes, alpha is the correct option because the data is normally distributed, and second, the subjects are same. We will test their mood before and after watching the films. So dependent sample t-test is the correct option, alpha. Sixth MCQ is, a study showed that surgeons who played video games for at least 3 hours each week make about 37 fewer mistakes and finish operation 27% faster than those who did not play video games. The type of surgery that they perform is laparoscopic surgery. This study uses means. What statistical test do you think was used to compare the means if the data is skewed? Whether dependent sample t-test,
A.
independent sample t-test, Wilcoxon sign rank,
Alpha.
Wilcoxon rank SAM, or chi-square test?
Alpha.
We we have
A.
to know some other option. The data is skewed.
Charlie?
No. Yes, Charlie. Wilcoxon signed that test. As the data is skewed and the sample is dependent, so we will use the Wilcoxon signed test. Seventh MCQ is, in a large hospital, the medical superintendent wishes to see whether the number of fight incidents per day will change if the number of uniformed security officers is doubled. A sample of 7 days before security is increased and 7 days after the increase was collected. Which test will be best for hypothesis testing? Whether dependent sample t-test, independent sample t-test, Wilcoxon ransom, z-test, or ANOVA?
A.
Yes, alpha is the correct option. 8th MCQ is, 5 students take anatomy paper 1 in first year and anatomy paper 2 in second year. Their overall course grades in percentage are listed below for both courses. Which of the following statistical procedure would be most appropriate to test the claim that the student overall course grades are same in both courses? Assume that assume that any necessary normality requires 4. This is the data of the 5 students. This is their percentages in paper 1 and paper 2. So we have to answer from these options whether two sample dependent sample t-test for means will be used, or two-tailed two sample independent t-test of means will be used, two-tailed two sample independent z-test of means will be used, or one-tailed two sample z-test for proportion will be used, or two-tailed two sample z-test of proportion will be used. Which test will be used?
Charlie?
No. Alpha is the correct option. As we are testing but in the same subjects, so it is a dependent test. And second, the we have to see whether it is two tail or the left tail or right tail. As our claim is that they are scoring same in both the courses, so it will be the two tail dependent sample t-test. So alpha will be correct option, two tail two sample dependent t-test of means. Ninth MCQ is, generally it is claimed that there is more effect of remembering by visual than by audio. A researcher takes a sample of 7 students and takes tests for after visual and audio lectures and score their test from 0 to 10. The researcher used the dependent sample t-test for hypothesis testing and found the test value of 2. The critical value for right tail test at alpha 0.05 is 1.83. What decision will a researcher will make? Whether to reject the null hypothesis, do not reject the null hypothesis, need more tests to reach a final decision, not enough data to establish decision, or the sample size is too small to formulate decision.
Beta?
The test value is 2 and the critical value is 1.83. So the 2 will lies in the rejection region. It will be beyond the critical value of 1.833. So we will reject the null hypothesis because the test value lies in the rejection region. So alpha will be correct option. We will reject the null hypothesis. 10th MCQ is, it is a very easy MCQ. The alternative non-parametric counterpart of dependent sample t-test is whether Wilcoxon signed independent sample t-test, ANOVA, Mann-Whitney U-test, Kruskul-Wallis test. It is Wilcoxon signed test. It is a non-parametric counterpart of the dependent sample t-test. In Wilcoxon's rank sum test, the sample is also dependent, but uh, the data is skewed or not normally distributed. So the non-parametric counterpart of dependent sample t-test is Wilcoxon signed test. Here is the key of my MCQs. This is our YouTube channel by the name of Community Medicine King Edward Medical University, and everyone can watch our presentations here. And thank you very much for today's presentation.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Awais. We can end this meeting.
Okay, Dr. Sadia.
Allah Hafiz.
Allah Hafiz.